Hey everybody, it's Megan again. I am so glad to see you, and I'm very excited to do these next series of videos. I have 3 videos, this one, the next one, and the next one, 3 videos that are going to be about setting up your family culture. Now, our family culture really centers a lot around our homeschooling. As most of you know, we homeschool. We have pretty much the entire time we've been schooling, so this will be our 9th year of homeschooling, if you count preschool, and which I do. And one thing that was interesting to me is when we first started homeschooling, the overwhelming reaction was pretty negative. I had a couple family members that were supportive, but mostly people wanted to know why in the world we would homeschool, and were we going to ruin our kids' lives and they wouldn't be able to get socialized, and all the regular arguments of homeschooling. So at first I kind of felt like I was going against the grain, but it's interesting, within the last 2 or 3 years I've had several friends that have started homeschooling, and the overwhelming reaction now is very positive, because I think since the culture is changing so much and education is changing so much, people are looking for a different alternative. And I just wanted to share our journey a little bit. In this first video, I will be sharing kind of how we began our homeschooling and how it has evolved, and also why we began our homeschooling journey in the first place and why we're still doing it. The second video, I'm going to go into a little bit of prep of the prep. Prep of the prep is the things I set up before the homeschool year starts. Those are my essentials that I have to get in place and make sure that I have organized so that I can have a successful homeschool year. And then I will also have another video about how we set up the homeschool year, how I did it at the beginning, how I do it now, what has worked, what to avoid if you're looking for things to run a little more smoothly. And that's what the third video will be about. So to begin this video, I'm going to explain how we started out. I always expected that I would homeschool my children for preschool. I didn't think there was any reason to send my kids to basically daycare. I don't personally believe that preschool is a good option for kids, because it takes you away at the prime of their life from their parents and their family. Now, if you're both working outside of the home, that is not going to work, and you'll need a more educational place for your kid to go. And so preschool would be a great option. But for us, after I said, okay, I'm not going to work anymore, I am going to stay home full time, then I was like, I am going to dedicate it completely to my kids, and I want as much time with them as I can. But I always thought that I would put my kids in school when they reached kindergarten, maybe first grade, depending on the maturity level and everything. So when my children are between 18 months and 2.5 years old, depending on their maturity and their learning style and everything, I start a more formal learning education. That means I set aside a time for learning. Before that, it's just basically play, but this means I do a lot more playing, but it's more learning based, and I am paying more attention to what I'm teaching them. So with my oldest, I started at 18 months, and he did really well, but I started to notice things that I thought, well, this is my first child, I'm not sure. I did a little bit of research, and I said, okay, these could be tendencies I need to watch out for. And so, but we moved almost a couple months after I started schooling him, and so I just started getting together with other moms and making it more of a homeschool group. And it worked out really well. We moved again, and I thought, you know what, as long as we're moving around so much, this would be a great anchor for him and my other children that were already coming along, that if we're going to be moving all the time, every couple of years, then they can have this one thing that stays the same, and that is their schooling. And so we kept it the same until I got pregnant with my 3rd child. I got really sick, and my son was right in that time where he was just learning how to read, and he he was just at that tipping point that I thought, oh, if I let back now, he might lose momentum and he might not like it as much. And I got a little bit worried, and also I got pressured. Well, what about school? And I was very sick. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to put him in a private school. And we did a lot of research and found a really good private school. It was a bilingual school. We were in Peru at the time, and it was a great school, and I felt really good about it. There were pros and cons of sticking him in school. The pros were that he learned Spanish. He was bilingual in, I would say, probably 6 weeks. It was amazing, probably because of his age. And then another pro was that he learned how to learn without me. Someone else was the teacher, and he also learned how to get along with friends and things like that, which he had already kind of done because he had a sister and he had church and we had activities outside of the home. So I wasn't really too worried about the socialization part, but it was nice for him to do other activities with other kids. Now, the parts that I didn't like that he was reviewing information. He already knew everything they covered in the entire year. He was only in there, I think, 3 or 4 months, but he knew all the information, and it was good because he only knew it in English and they were learning it in Spanish, so it helped him out a lot. But at the same time, he got really bored because they went over it and over it and over it. And that led to a lot of dawdling and just looking around and and I got this feeling that he was learning how to fill time rather than use time wisely. Also, another thing was that he started seeing that he could just get by with doing the minimum, which wasn't an option before at home. And that I don't want my kids to think that you just give what people are asking for and just fill the requirements and you're done. Don't try your best. And he got into the habit of never trying his best. And the last thing that I really didn't like about it was that he also learned several bad behaviors, bad words, things like that. And now, of course, I realize he could have learned these things anywhere. And you know what? It's not the fault of the school or the schooling system. I know plenty of kids go through public school and private school and are totally fine. But I felt very strongly with him, with the tendency I was noticing, that I felt uncomfortable with it. And I know when I get that uncomfortable feeling, it's time for a change. And so as soon as I felt well again, we took him out of school, and then we moved again. And so I kept him at home. Right before we moved, I met this wonderful woman that was a homeschooler. She was actually from the United States as well, traveled a lot with her husband's job, and had 7 children. And her children were awesome. I loved the way they went about education. I loved the way they were so courteous and kind, and they always wanted to learn. And I was like, this is the kind of family culture I want. And up to that point, I always knew the things I kind of wanted, but I hadn't thought of it in a way of homeschooling and family culture being so connected and creating my own family culture. I never thought of it in that way. It's when it, like that little click, that little light bulb goes on. And so I was so grateful for her and her mentoring, because she gave me a lot of good ideas. And she said, this is how I did it. And by then I was also researching more, and between her and researching and praying and reading and everything, I started to find my method. And once I started finding my method, I felt more comfortable teaching. I felt more comfortable with what we were covering and everything, but I still didn't feel like, I always thought I would get like this, vision that, yes, you are a homeschooler, you should homeschool your children forever. And people had told me things like that, so I expected to get that. And I was like, I'm waiting, and I never got it. I was just there doing what I need to do every day, and I had a lot of struggles, and I had 1 or 2 bright moments that I was like, okay, we're doing okay. But there were so many things that I'm like, am I doing the right thing? I just don't know. But I just kept taking another step forward and another step forward. And I felt I should not put them into a school. So I will homeschool them. But I'm open. That's what I always said in my prayers. I'm open. So you know what? If you want them in a public school or a private school, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to keep them in homeschooling because it's working out. They love it. I love it a lot of the time. Not always, but a lot of the time. But those frustrated days was when I would be like, oh, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. Maybe I'm not doing this correctly, or maybe I'm not supposed to do this. And I would get so frustrated. But then about 2 or 3 years ago, when I started realizing the fruits of the labor, when I started seeing my kids answer questions in classes outside of the home, and when I started seeing their behavior when we went into a foreign situation, and when I saw that their attitude was totally different than their peers that we knew, I'm not saying all kids are this way, but that we knew in public and private school, their attitude towards learning, their attitude towards life. And I was like, these are my kids. So this is working for us. I'm not saying it's an answer for everyone, but for us right now, I'm not saying next year, right now, it is the answer. And it's amazing how the Lord has led me with the things I've needed to taught, especially in character and morals and the gospel and everything that I feel is really important and a foundation that my children need very strongly. It's amazing how He's led me to teach something, and then an issue will come up. And I'll be like, oh my goodness, they know the answers to this. They already have it set in stone for them because we have learned this earlier, and it's not an issue for them. So I've been so grateful for that, especially this past year where I didn't hesitate. This year when I was making my curriculum, even though we moved and we had totally planned to put the kids back in school when we came to the United States. I went to the schools, I started doing what I needed to do to check everything out, and I felt awful. I felt like I was going to puke, literally sick. And looking at the curriculums and looking at the attitudes and looking at the behavior problems, I was like, I cannot stick my children in this environment. They will lose their love of learning. They will lose their respect and dignity and courtesy and morals. And I knew when I visited those schools, it was like my answer to those prayers I'd had all those years of, okay, for another year at least, this is what we're doing. And I felt really confident about it. Now it's interesting, whenever I feel really confident, I get my answer for the next year because I go on a year-by-year basis. Whenever I get my answer, I start getting all excited and I get my plans out and I start writing things down and I get everything all planned out. And then all the doubt comes. Like my husband will say something, or a friend will say something, or I'll read this article, or someone passing by will say something, or I'll have a really bad day with the kids and I'm like, do I really want to spend all day with them every day? And then all those doubts come back. But it's so great because I've already written down my answers, I've already written down my plan, and so I'm just move forward. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next video. I'm going to talk about how I prep for this, how I set up my homeschool year, and even if you don't homeschool, even if you public school, private school, whatever, everyone needs a family culture. And what do you really want in that culture? How do you want it to set up? How do you want your family to feel around each other? What kind of conversations do you want to have? Everything. And so I'm going to talk about that. I hope you will join me. If you have any comments, questions, anything, leave them below. And I also have articles on my blog at meganfonseca.com. We'll talk to you later, guys. Thanks so much. Bye.